Well, welcome back everyone to Along the Road. I hope you had a good Thanksgiving, and we are back here in New Hampshire. I'm Pastor Josh at the First Congregational Church.
And I'm Katie, the Children's Discipleship Director.
And today we have a guest with us, and this is Ann Kohl.
Hello.
Ann is here because, well, I asked you to be here. But we want to talk a little bit about, I was thinking, as I shared with you, we are going into this season, just came out of Thanksgiving, all the gatherings, and some are fun, some are not. You know, you have that one aunt or uncle or cousin that just can make everything very difficult, but you have to get together as family sometimes. And you might have office parties and other things between now and the end of the year, and it's all about how do we deal with relationships and people. And I know you've done a lot of work on this thing called the Enneagram. And that, I know first you have to understand yourself.
Yes.
But then my question was, one, teach us about the Enneagram. So what is this? And then if we have time, or maybe the next episode, what we'll do is say, well, now how do I use that when I'm going to an office party or when I'm getting the gathering that I can't avoid certain things? How does that help me?
Sure.
So first, before you even jump into Enneagram, why don't you just tell us a brief synopsis of Ann Kohl and what got you into this topic? Because I know you didn't start here in life.
That's true. I did not start here.
Yeah.
And thank you. And I'm so happy to be here and honored to be sitting in this beautiful library with you all and with you all.
Yeah.
So I grew up as a military child, an Army brat, they would say, and moved all over the world.
Oh, wow.
I don't know, maybe we lived in 9 places. So Korea for 3 years, Germany for 2 different tours, and then ultimately...
So by places, you also mean countries. Like, it wasn't just around the U.S. It was like all over the world.
Yes.
Okay, cool.
And ultimately graduated from high school in Oklahoma, which is, for some people, a foreign country, too.
Yeah.
Very, very different.
It
and
is.
Lovely, actually. I loved Oklahoma. But I always knew I wanted to be in the healing profession of some type, and originally thought it would be veterinary. I just have a love and respect for all animals, but I did realize at one point I was at some camp and I was on the back of a horse and I was feeling very anxious, and the horse could tell.
Oh, wow. They
and
can.
The horse was,
that's true.
not listening to me, and I thought, I don't know if I'll do well with hurt animals or animals that are maybe a little more aggressive. I'm just a little too peaceful, I think, inside, and want that peace and don't do well with the chaos. So I steered more toward humans. And I think I was 16 and I said, well, let me just see if I can handle some blood. So I volunteered as a candy striper at an Army hospital in Oklahoma.
Okay.
And I was so grateful because they took me into like a surgical clinic, just an outpatient clinic. And I was able to see a lot of gross stuff. And I did okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
I did okay. And I also thought, oh, well, maybe I want to be a doctor. But when I realized the doctor comes and goes, but the nurse stays, I said, I want to stay. I want to be there with the patient. I want to do a lot of hands-on physical healing.
Nurses do a lot of work, not just with doctor's orders, but talking and helping and encouraging, and they see the change from when maybe after surgery or when someone comes in to like when they're being discharged.
It's true.
The healing process.
The process.
They're there.
Yeah.
And I don't know how many times we visit people and they're like, our nurse so-and-so is the best. And they like, it's almost like they become part of their family.
Yeah.
So, and that's attracted you to that. That's pretty cool. Yeah.
It did. Yes. And for example, even within nursing, I realized I don't want emergency room. It's a little too chaotic again.
Yes.
But also you don't get that relationship.
Yeah.
It's a quick, stop the bleeding, send them off to surgery or whatever diagnosis, and then send them upstairs.
To where a nurse will have that time.
Yes. Yes. So even within the field, there's such a variety, which was wonderful.
Yeah.
So I said, I think I'll be a nurse, and applied for nursing programs. Wanted to go to a expensive university. And so my father said, well, why don't you get a scholarship? That would be really helpful. The Army can do that for you.
Yeah.
You kind of grew up this way. So I did, and I did ROTC in college and then served for 4 years in the U.S. Army Nurse Corps.
Well, thank you for your service.
Oh, you're welcome.
Absolutely.
It was a pleasure because it was supporting wounded soldiers, and actually it was in San Antonio, Texas, so we worked more with civilians than we did with soldiers. I served between Persian Gulf 1 and 2.
Okay.
So there wasn't a ton going on. There was Bosnia happening.
Yes.
So we had a couple soldiers from there, but I started on a med-surg floor, which is a great place for a nurse to start. It's just very basic procedures, and then moved to a burn unit.
Oh.
So burns was my passion when I was in college. My senior internship was at a children's burn center in Washington, D.C. So I was so grateful. The Army has a burn unit, and I got to be there.
Yeah.
So it was really special.
It really touches that you said you wanted to be in the healing process, and it feels like that there's a lot of healing, not just on the outside.
Exactly.
That happens there.
But that's part of it too, I think, with burns that I didn't realize. I do really like to do wound care, and obviously that's an enormous part of burn care, but it is the psychological component.
Yeah.
And it is the image that has been so changed depending on how severely burned someone is. So, and our unit took children all the way to adults, so I really liked that too.
Yeah.
I think the closest Shriners Hospital was Houston, so sometimes they would send the patients to us, even if they were kiddos for a little while. So, yes, it was very fulfilling, very stressful. I ended up on a burn flight team for about 10 months. You're on call quite a bit, and it was, you're young, you can handle it. But it's an adventure. It's an adventure.
You can sleep tomorrow. It's okay.
You can sleep tomorrow. Yes, indeed. So, and then I became pregnant with our first child and exited the military, and then started the adventure of motherhood. Yeah. And that was an adventure.
That's a healing process.
It doesn't end either, does it? No, it doesn't. Right. Thank you for saying that.
So, how many children now?
So we have 5 children, and actually we have 4 in heaven. So part of that process too was learning about miscarriage and again, diving back into some of the healing and the psychological and physical parts of that. So we did have miscarriages in between the babies that we were able to deliver and bring into the world. And at our church in San Antonio, started a ministry there for women who lose children. Basically pre-birth till 18 months. Yeah. So that was wonderful. And we partnered with a Christian OBGYN to have something for them to give to moms who come in and kind of get the bad news on the ultrasound. Because when you go to these offices, they give you all kinds of trinkets and things when you're pregnant that are just, supplements and things that people will drop off. But when you lose a baby, you basically just get medical bills. Yeah. And that's hard. Deep, deep sorrow. So we would make bath salts and we just did all kinds of things and had a packet for women. It had chocolate in it.
Of course.
Yes. But it actually had some really good literature that was, and had help for dads in it, which was so important too.
Yeah. I was going to say, there's a guy in Iowa who's a pastor, and he does a lot of work there. And I just worked near him. I was in another church, but his big passion was the men and their loss and grief during a miscarriage. I know it happened in his life, but he said it's a very silent grief that they go through. Really, and most people, rightfully so, are focused on the mom that just lost a child. Yeah. And the guy's just supposed to be strong enough and keep things going. And there's a whole emotion and healing that people forget about. So
it's really
I think important. That's great.
It's just as much of a loss for a father. Absolutely. It's no less of a loss. And it's just how you approach it and learning that it can be a lot of friction in the marriage, actually. Certainly for child loss where the child's older, we know that can cause divorce. But even at the miscarriage level, and even among believers, there's a lot of pressure and stress on the marriage at that point, and there's just sadness. Yeah. And working with that. So that was a really important time, and then we moved to Arizona. So we were in San Antonio about 12 years. We had 4 of our kids there, and then my husband had a big, exciting job opportunity, and I never, ever, ever wanted to go to Arizona because I do not care for the heat. Yes. And of course, San Antonio is hot enough, but now we're going to go into the desert.
Where it's hotter.
But they always say it's a dry heat, but whatever.
Dry heat's still hot.
It's very hot, and it's 115, yes. Yeah. Oh my goodness. It was crazy. And that was an intense time for us too, and God just prepared us and taught us many things during that desert season. But we had our 5th child unexpectedly, and that was an amazing blessing. Always is. And his name is Isaac. Yes. He made us laugh when we found out we were pregnant and cry. But he's a blessing. So, I think through those years, I've always had an interest in personality. So even when I was about 21, 22, dating my current husband, I remember seeing this book in a bookstore that said, Why You Act the Way You Do. And I just was immediately drawn to that. Yeah. And it's the why that I'm interested in. Okay. Right? Yeah. And so for this whole time, I've always loved relationships and people. wanted to kind of study it and understand it, love psychology, but really I have more of a bent toward the physical healing side, and I said I never want to go into just straight psychology.
Yeah.
It's just
you don't want to be a therapist sitting in a room. No,
and yet that's kind of what I've ended up doing in a way, and I'm
never say never.
I know.
I told God I didn't want to be a pastor, so yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
Tell you what, thank you, Lord. You know what you do.
Yeah.
So, yes, and then fast forward to the latter part. So we've been here in New Hampshire for 17 years. We've actually been at the church for 17 years. So it's been wonderful, and a place where our children have grown up, and a place that they call home. So we're very grateful for that.
That's great. We're grateful for your family. So we
well,
enjoy them all.
Yes, and they're coming home. 2 of them are coming home today. So
Yay!
I'm excited.
That's
I know,
wonderful.
the boys, yes. So the bringing in some of this, the study of this. So I had heard about Enneagram, and I was a little hesitant. I wasn't sure what to think of it. The symbol was a little interesting looking.
Mm-hmm.
And I really, like many of us who are walking with the Lord, want to be thoughtful and careful about what we lay our eyes on, what we listen to, what we allow to come into our spirit, where the Holy Spirit resides. But I had done some other types of personality inventories and learned about them. My husband's Myers-Briggs certified, and I did that in the military too. They type everyone for that, and I thought that was great.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I was in a bookstore, and it was Enneagram from a Christian Perspective. It might have been Richard Rohr's book that came out probably 20, 25 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I allowed myself, I kind of prayed, and I felt like my conscience was clear to pick it up and take a look at it, and I was like, wow.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
It's fascinating.
To begin with, it's just fascinating.
It is. It's fascinating. And then I found others in the Christian community whom I respected, and who were handling this material in what I would consider an appropriate way.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is that it does not become the answer to anything.
Correct.
But it is just a map.
Right.
The Lord is our answer. And that's why, with this symbol, not just having the cross in the middle of this, and you're never going to see the diagram like this. This isn't, there's no one's putting
I've never
a cross
seen it
in
this
the
way
middle.
before, yeah. Well, and we'll get it on the screen, I think, later when we get into it more. I have it for you, I promise.
Yes. But I particularly put the resurrected cross because, the atonement and the indwelling Holy Spirit solves our personality brokenness.
Yes.
It really does. But like with all things spiritual, it's done and then you're still working it out.
Yeah, sanctification process.
Exactly. Yes.
All right, so I'm going to pause because I have a feeling we could dive really quick.
Yes.
And I know Enneagram. I know I've enjoyed it for several years. Not quite as deep as you have. And the thing that tipped me over was a book called Spiritual Rhythms in the Enneagram, written by some Gordon Conwell grads, and it was very helpful on the history of it, the central parts of it that can help us, and how we relate with others. So I was like, okay, that's good, and I've enjoyed that. But it took me a long time to separate Enneagram, MMPI, or your color. There's personality, and there's Enneagram, and I had to understand that they're different. And what you said earlier was more about the why, like what motivates you. So can you just give us a brief, okay, here's personality charts. I'm type A. I'm,
a golden retriever.
People have all those different words to it. I'm, the LSTG, whatever those, the Myers, the MMPI numbers, and they have all of those. But you can have two people of the same personality type and be different in the Enneagram because they measure something different, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
So can you just give us okay, here's Enneagram for Dummies?
Yeah.
Sure.
So separate
No, we'll call it Enneagram 101.
101.
Enneagram
Okay,
101.
sorry. Thank you,
Yes,
Katie,
yes.
ever the teacher. But separate it in our hearts or in our minds. So, okay, this is what I'm looking at first. And it's really helped me tremendously once I understood that. Mm-hmm. So maybe if we can just broaden that up.
Sure.
We can help people see, I guess, what I saw at some point.
So I think it's both and for what you just said.
Yeah.
So I will say that one of the reasons why this system works is because there's truth in it.
Yeah.
And it's real. And just like anything that God has imbued with his presence and his design, it's going to ring true. But what's interesting is the deeper teaching that I did was a 3-year instruction on Tritype with Catherine Faber in California, but she actually uses the Myers-Briggs system and the Enneagram together.
Oh, interesting.
Yes. And so what I will say to your point is that you could have someone whose lead type is type 1, but they might have a different Myers-Briggs than another type 1. Okay, so there are going to be nuances, but I will say that, believe it or not, a person's physical structure, their face structure, their body, their somatic type, tendencies, verbiage, how they test on, I don't care what personality battery you put out there, you're going to see a pattern.
Okay.
And it does all come together. And even as I'm also a certified herbalist, so that whole field of study, it's Ayurvedic, so it comes from India, but they have sort of grouped people into 3 types of body systems, but it also involves their mental state.
Oh, wow.
And that fits perfectly within this system. Now, there are 9 numbers here, there are only 3 there, but you can group them according to triad. So all over the world for thousands of years, people have been realizing that there are patterns, and they've been trying to figure out what they are so that they understand the people in their life, or if their physicians diagnose them appropriately. Even back to Hippocrates and more ancient than that. So with the humors and that sort of thing. So it really does all fit together.
Yeah, it brings it together.
But the difference with Enneagram for as compared to Myers-Briggs is Myers-Briggs, for example, looks at how you process information, how you take in sensations. Are you more moving toward people, or are you more moving away? That would be introverted, extroverted. Enneagram, I would say, is like a couple levels deeper than that.
Right.
Enneagram is an ego system it's really based on ego defense mechanisms that protect us and helped us as we were young to get safety and security and love in a certain style. And it's the why. So why are we doing it? So we can have every number on this system doing the same activities. The lady out in California that I studied under, she actually went into the prison systems, and she said, every number on the Enneagram is in prison. They've all done egregious acts. But what made them do it? What was it that caused them to end up in this place?
It's that deeper motivation beneath the things.
Exactly.
You know,
right.
What makes the class clown be a class clown? Well, he's deflecting because of trauma or because of something else, and it's become a defense mechanism.
Absolutely.
And then you can find where that came from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it gets reinforced
because it works.
It works.
It works.
That's right. It works. It works for a time. And I think, when we think about our understanding through Freud of ego, superego, and id, again, it's a way of describing something that is going on in the inner landscape, which is real, but we're just trying to figure out what is it we're seeing. Instead of feeling around in the dark like we're bumping into furniture, we're going to sort of create these structures.
Right.
And
give it form.
Give it form and a place to land. It's the same when you talk about the body. If you're talking about, biology, and you say, the cardiovascular system, the endocrine system, they're not separate. They're working together constantly.
Yes.
But for us to understand them, we pull them apart.
We study them.
We deduce, and we separate in order to get it. But we really need to keep on working on pulling it all back together, which is why when I talk about Enneagram, I really do want to say all the systems, whether you do DISC or whatever you're doing, it really does all fit together because it's the same pattern that we're seeing. It's just a different way of calling it out.
And as a believer, I know there are people out there like, oh, Christians, and it's less and less. We're like, oh, that's all. Don't get into that stuff, or it can be all crazy. And I kind of see in my view, everything out there is what God has made, and we are discovering that, just like you said with the body systems. People can discover Enneagram or the DISC profile or MMPI, and they're discovering that. Now, how they go about that or where they say that comes from, they may not point to God, but I think the truth, the general revealed truth, is out there. Paul lets us know that in everything. And so I even see this as that discovery of how God has made us. And we're discovering that. But I do like, and we'll get to that at some point, the picture you have on there. You're like, this is centered on the resurrected Christ. And that's the difference, I think. So responding to people, whether it's this system or any, it's like, okay, you said already, it's not the key. This isn't like the answer for everything. Christ is the answer for everything.
That's right.
And so filtering that, I think, is important, or not blindly just oh, this is the only thing for me. And sometimes people just need something and they jump onto it and they leave Christ behind.
Yeah.
And so it's that where Paul says you take all thoughts captive, to the Word of God. And you say,
Yes.
okay, does this match God's Word? Is this, because people can take this or any, and then they can kind of skew off from Christ.
Absolutely.
Out of proportion.
Out of proportion, out of place, and say, okay, this is where we are. Even some of the Eastern medicines, they're discovering what God has made, but they don't acknowledge God as creator. So
That's right.
so they're skewed off from that, and
Right.
they've made themselves the most important in the world.
Yeah.
And so the truth that they have found in medicine or herbalist or whatever, it's good.
Yeah.
But their foundation is not Christ.
That's right.
And so
Yeah.
just I think for people listening and for here, just a reminder that that's the key. It's why I wanted you to come, because I know you come from that perspective.
Mm-hmm.
But just a reminder to people that underneath everything, because we won't say it often, we get into this conversation, but underneath everything is first filter this through
That's right.
maintaining in the Word and go through that. So
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, that's really well said. And one of the things I say about Enneagram is that, to me, it is the double helix of the personality. So it's almost like it's DNA.
Yeah.
And the patterns that go on here are incredible. But just like any scientist, just to your point, we can look under the microscope and say, oh my gosh, look at the chromosomes, the mitochondria, the nuclei. How did evolution get this far? This is phenomenal. Wow. And then some Christian scientists can look under there and go, glory to God.
Yeah.
And so what's here is real.
Yeah.
But who created this? Well, I know who created this. And not only that, I can see the brokenness reflected here, even by non-Christians who see the brokenness reflected here.
Yeah.
But they just think that if we can fix this ourselves with self-actualization or practicing these practices, then we'll arrive.
Right.
And you're never going to arrive. You can practice the practices, and that will help you. But without the Holy Spirit, you're not going to actually make lasting improvement.
Right.
Or sanctification, as we call it.
Yeah, and the improvement in the Christian world is more and more like Christ.
It is.
The Holy Spirit moves.
It is.
So why don't you give us a basic overview?
Sure.
We can look at this now. I mean, Katie's probably been looking at it. I have mine up. So
Yes.
we can look at this now. Why don't you just give us introduction now?
Yeah.
We have some basics there, and I'll put this on the screen if later there's some great beginner websites or something, you can give that to me.
Sure. Books.
Or books.
Yes, there are plenty.
Good. Top. I would say top 2 or 3.
Sure.
For the 101 people, we don't know what's going on.
No, absolutely.
And then I'll make sure those are in the description, and we can do that. So why don't you just give us a basic overview of what we're looking at, and I'll have it on the screen. I might even put up a couple times as you go through it, which is fine. So just walk us through this circle here.
Yes.
That you have.
Yes. First, I am going to actually say a little caveat,
Yes.
a little bit back to what you were saying about some Christians feeling sensitive about participating in studying this. And I would say you honor your conscience. The Lord wants us to do that. So some people in Scripture, when Paul talks about food sacrifice to idols, for some people that's totally fine. If blessed by prayer, not a problem. But for others, it's not.
Yeah.
So I never, ever say to someone, oh, you should feel fine about this. If you don't feel fine about this,
Don't do it.
focus on something else. If you feel fine about this, come on in, take a look at it. But keep your heart open to the Lord's leading. That's really important to do. If at any point you're like, oh, I'm out, then that's okay.
Yeah.
So
that's
I
helpful.
always
Thank
say
you.
that.
Yeah.
So Enneagram, as we know it today, is a personality system that's been around about 50 years. And it is a composite. It's like a patchwork quilt of many contributors over literally thousands of years to come up with this. It is non-proprietary. It's available to all because it's come from so many places.
But it's only been how can it only have been around for 50 years? And
So there are many Enneagrams. An Enneagram means 9-sided figure.
Okay.
So even back in geometry, Pythagoras had symbols like this. But the Enneagram of personality uses psychological concepts combined with geometry to map. What I say is just it's the personality DNA. It's really what's happening. But major contributors were definitely Pythagoras, a lot of mathematical geometry and understanding the flow. And interestingly enough, this particular symbol, which has at its base, and don't ask me to go deeper because I'm not a math person, is 0, 1, and 7, which according to people in math, that pattern involves creation.
Yeah.
It involves the dynamic, creative movement of God, actually. And so they picked this one because it is a moving entity. And our personalities are dynamic.
Yeah.
So then we had contributors, the early church fathers and mothers, desert church fathers and mothers, the Essenes, people that got away from the world to think, contemplate, and really work with their sin nature. And out of that came some of those 7 deadly sins of the early church, which morphed into 9 here, and an awareness that each of us kind of struggles with what's called a passion, right? That is sort of our besetting sin that we struggle with. And that's a part of this. You move into the Middle Ages, there's a guy named Ramon Lollet who has this Enneagram where every point touches every point, and on it he has the qualities of the Godhead.
Yeah.
And it was fascinating. The teacher that I worked with and certified with out in California, not a believer, someone asked her, "Oh, have you seen the Lollet medallion?"
Yeah.
And she said, "What?" And saw it, and it was just phenomenal because it's got wisdom and glory and all these things about the Godhead around this symbol. And then you move into the 1950s and 60s, and there were 2 men that were really important contributors in South America. Oscar Chauzo and Claudio Naranjo. They were both seekers. They were not Christians. They were involved in psychology movements. One of them ended up at Berkeley in California. And at one of those specific teachings, a particular Catholic priest was present and really got excited about what he was learning. And this is like 1970, 71. And ended up taking that information and sharing it really across the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
And so if you work with a spiritual director, particularly whether it's in a Protestant tradition like Episcopalian or Anglican, a lot of times they'll have spiritual directors, but certainly in the Catholic Church and in the contemplative movement, familiarity with the Enneagram is just a known thing.
Yeah.
And it was because of that original, I think it was Father Orr, Richard Orr, not something like that. So all of these folks have contributed. The lady I studied under has contributed. Some other people like Don Riso and Russ Hudson have contributed. And probably people will continue to contribute because we're learning more and more as we go.
And because it's an open system, it's not trademarked. Like if you said, you know what, I want to write a book about, you don't need permission from anybody. It's there. Unlike the disc profile, somebody owns that.
It's proprietary.
That proprietary information. And they came up with that. They started this. This has been around for a long time. So,
Yes. And within this space, so within any field of study, you're going to have schools, right? Schools that have some distinctives and some differences, and there are. And some people have created some aspects of it, and they've named it. But even so, as long as you give attribution, it's all part of the system.
Of course,
so,
of course.
Yes.
All right, so.
Yes, so let's talk about this. So this is a beautiful circle, and let's just look at the circle part of it. We understand that really reflects God too, because he's, the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. And what those from a Christian perspective like to say is that in the center, I do have this resurrected cross, but we often say that it's the eye of God in the middle. And what that means is he is everything here and more. We're created in the divine image. We're a reflection of him. We're going to end up being a particular facet of that gorgeous, reflective presence of his. But he is always central to everything in the middle. Yeah. So we'll just think about that. And then you can see the triangle. You have a nice equilateral triangle running between the 9, the 3, and the 6. This system is triadic.
Yes.
Always. It's always about 3. And one of the reasons why it rings true for Christians is we understand it's Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. He made us in his image. So we also have head, heart, and gut. We're told to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And we find it everywhere we go. We find it within ourselves. We find it outside of ourselves. So you can see that is happening. And then you see the other numbers around there. And each one of those numbers reflects a way of seeing life and the why behind how to get the needs of life. And that would be safety, security, autonomy, love, respect.
It's like it's like the parts of Maslow's hierarchy.
It is. It is. Yes. And actually, something additional that a lot of people don't know about the system is that part of it. It's the instincts.
Yeah.
So if you look a little bit more at this image, you can see that there are some dotted lines that are breaking off
like
3 additional sections on the outside. Mm-hmm. And so you have what are called the instinctive centers or instinctual centers. So 8, 9, and 1 are in the gut instinctual center. 2, 3, and 4 are in the heart instinctual center. And 5, 6, and 7 are in the head instinctual center. Mm-hmm. And that's actually a really nice way to start with this and to understand is that some of us are going to be more body-oriented, more instinctive in our gut, a gut knowing, and we are going to be running more on anger and a desire to have control over either ourselves or the environment in order to get the love, the safety, the security that we long for. And also in this center, I will say that the issues that each one of these types, 8, 9, and 1, really get triggered off of is justice or injustice. And again, it's how they perceive justice or injustice. But it will trigger that strong sense of anger. And then moving down to the heart center as an overview, the 2, 3, and 4. The heart center is so much about, do you love me? Am I lovable? What can I do to get your attention? And for you to see me as desirable. And so the 2s, 3s, and 4s take on roles. And they take them on in order to gain that love. And a lot of times they'll do that from the time they were little. And again, we talked about what works. We overemphasize, like, do it again, do it again, do it again. And we'll get into details as we go around to the specifics. But the struggle of the heart center is the avoidance of shame. Really, and nobody wants to feel this. But this is it's a trigger point. And underneath these 3 types is kind of this sadness that they're not loved for who they are, but really for the role that they've taken on. And that's why they perpetuate the role, because it's like, oh,
at least it's something.
At least it's something.
So someone in this area could most likely be someone who very much is maybe like a people pleaser.
Absolutely.
Might sit in here and not understanding why, but they just are, and everyone likes them because they're always there for them. They're always doing these things, and they'll burn themselves out that way. Is that fair?
Absolutely.
Okay.
You got it.
I just want to have an understanding of that.
Yes, absolutely. And it's all going to be 3 separate flavors of that, and we'll talk about that again, just overview. Moving over to the head center, the issue there is really abating anxiety or fear, and it's really a fear of chaos. So it's like, what can we do? What do I need to know in order to be safe and secure and to keep chaos at bay? And a lot of times with the folks in the head center, it's like, who knows this information? Where can I get the information, the knowledge, the wisdom to be safe and secure? And I'm on the hunt for that at all times. And then, so I was trained in Tritype. So I will just bring that up briefly. I'm not going to go into it. It's an amazing, much more accurate look at each of us. But the reality is we have all 3 centers online at all times if we're healthy.
Right.
One of them, one of these numbers is going to be the CEO. It's going to run the show. But really there is a number from each center.
Yes.
And when you combine all 3 of those, you actually get a type unto itself.
Yeah.
So a lot of times if you're out there in Enneagram world and you're looking at, type 9, you see a panel and they're all type 2s and you're like, well, I kind of relate to that, but not so much to that. Part of it is that we're complex. The other, right? Right?
That sounds like an understatement to me.
We are very complex and nuanced. But the other part of it is if you're not having a panel with a tri-type panel, which means maybe you have 2s up there, but they're not in the same tri-type. Okay, so you can have, say, a 2, 6, 9. So your 2 is coming from your heart, your 6 is your head number, and your 9 is your gut number. With a 2, 7, 8, which is a very different 2. Very different 2.
Absolutely.
In fact, a 2, 6, 9 with a 9, 6, 2 and a 6, 2, 9, even though they lead with different numbers, will relate to each other so much more, because when those 3 types come together, certain aspects are accentuated, and other things like the blind spot is also increased. but their purpose in life, their goal, their mission is the same.
Right.
And so the 27 tritypes actually have names. And the reason tritype is so helpful, especially for young people, but anyone, is it kind of shows you your life purpose.
Yeah.
It's fascinating.
Oh.
So the 269 is actually called the Good Samaritan. And that's my tritype.
Yay. And you
Which
can,
is crazy.
and after the story you told us of how you started out, we're like, oh, that makes sense.
But right? I know.
Oh, I see that. That
The
makes
guy
sense.
on the side of the
Yeah.
road.
But I'm
Yeah.
telling you, you look back and you say, what?
Yeah.
The threads of this were there all along.
Yeah.
Usefulness here, if you just want to throw a practical, if you have young children, if you're a teacher, I mean, the ability, number one, to start recognizing instinct. What's driving this child? With compassion. And number two is to just, it's like a treasure hunt. It's like, oh, I'm seeing these qualities in you. Whoa, oh, wow, maybe I can even recognize your tritype. Let's talk about, like, I'm actually going to meet with a high schooler. Let's talk about some areas that might be really good for you. Again, a wheelhouse, not a, like, you're going to be this, microbiologist.
Right.
Yeah.
But a general spot, because sometimes in our society, we're just like clueless about where to even begin.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, there's
You
so
know?
many choices.
So many
I
choices.
understood when I learned about tritype. I didn't start, tritype came later but for me, and then I understood, I don't think this helps other people, is we all have the tritype. It's like a tripod, but we have one leg that's just bigger than the others.
That's right.
And that's what keeps us off balance. And so the healthier you are, the more even all the legs are.
Excellent.
It seemed to make sense to
Yes,
me
so true.
because and then I learned, where I sit, and I go, oh, that makes a lot of sense. And I know, so when you say you said 269, right? You could be, 2 could be your big one, but 9 could be your big one. So even those will be a little slightly different in how they do it, because which one is the dominant bigger? Am I leading with my gut? Am I leading with my heart? Or am I in my head? And you kind of process that. And so it really has helped me, not in my purpose. It's more helped me in where all my fears come from. I'm very much 6 heavy. So we can figure that out later. But very much, I am very much 6 heavy, and I have a lot of 3 in me, and I'm pretty sure I'm 9 on the gut side. But I don't touch the gut very much. So it's like a little stub over there. What's your gut feel? I'm like, I don't know. I don't pay attention to it.
Oh, you need strengthening there.
And then I was described to somebody, in our sanctification process, if all of these are 100% healthy, which won't happen, because I can be a 6, but even utilize some of my 7. So
of course.
But if it's all 100% healthy, all of that 100% healthy is Christ. It's the full and complete person, which I know we never get to. So it's really helped me see that and realize that I might have these 3 things, but one of them really drives the others.
It does. That's right.
And learning, well, for me, fearfully learning to connect to the other ones. For someone else, it might not be fearful, but for me it is. So it's oh, that's really helpful, to even know that there's something that I ignore in what I do.
Yes. And to your point, really to be healthy and to be what I would consider to be resting in that completed work of Christ that we really can have and access at all times. We show up in any situation appropriately, present, speaking to that, being active to that, in whatever is needed. Instead of imposing our personality structure and our rigidness onto a space or onto a person or onto ourselves, we're free. We're truly free. And, one of the other interesting teachings around this, even though some Christians have contributed and some haven't been Christians, is each one of these numbers has a divine quality. And they call it that. And there's an essence. And we know that. We know that the Lord implanted within our personalities when he created us something beautiful that resides within even the most broken, hurting person. It's there. Sometimes the structure can be really, really heavy. So one of the things people say is, well, are you born with this? Or do you acquire it? Can it change? You are born with it. And we know when we look at even infants, we can see, even in utero, some babies are just maybe more active, or when they come out, they're just sad. They're just a little more sad
or colicky.
And sometimes it's physical, but even the physical is often tied because the nervous system and the personality are tied.
Absolutely.
But part of it definitely is inborn. The other part is the power of the family of origin. We know that how someone grows up, whether there was secure attachment, whether mom and dad were consistently present. Yeah. And here I would say again, whether mom and dad could recognize the inherent personality of the child and work with that, or whether they imposed their personality structure onto the child or ignored it, or didn't inspire it and work with it, can make a difference too. And then the third part, so it's kind of threes. It's like you're born with it, family of origin, free will.
Yeah.
And it's just a nice way of looking at that. So what that means is you're born with it. It's a gift, but it's not rigid in the sense that you can learn and grow. And for people who grew up in really tough homes, their ability to flex around the work that needs to happen is harder for them. Mm-hmm. There's more reactivity and defensiveness and more barrier.
Especially if you have trauma in your younger child. Well, any part of your child, but in the younger developing years.
So difficult.
It's because the instinct of flight or fight, the instinct.
Protection.
It's your brain doesn't have time to think, oh, where am I in this Tritype? What am I reacting to? It just reacts. It runs away, or it hides, or it just lashes out, whatever it is.
And understandably.
Yeah. And then you can come back and be like, oh, that's why I've done it. And you can recognize that. I think you can grow from that, but that's very, very hard to just, you don't get rid of trauma. I don't know how to say it any other way.
You don't. You have to work with it, but it takes special care. It takes special work. And this can be part of that, but it's, you are working at a disadvantage. And so again, back to, if you haven't had a family or you're thinking about raising children, learning how God made your child as a unique individual sets them up for a lifetime of stability. Even though they're going to go through those hard times, they'll have more psychological flexibility, more options, more strategies for coping with someone else. What's really, really wonderful, though, I will say, is maybe you grew up in a family that was really tough and you carried that forward. But oftentimes, in the Lord's grace, you will meet a friend, or maybe it will become a spouse who has a healthier structure. Maybe they came with a different background, and you can have another chance at this. So it's like a renewal.
I also think learning yourself, even before the child, then helps me understand, oh, this is why I'm reacting this way. And if I continue that, if I don't work on myself, becoming more Christ-like, whatever these systems are, if I don't work on myself, then I'm just passing that along to the child instead of like showing growth in myself. Like even over the years, my kids are teenagers and I've changed this way, and they've noticed we change and we keep learning. So I'm learning. 48, something like that. I'm learning, and that means you're always learning. It's just like developing this process, like we always talk about discipleship, the lifelong learning.
Lifelong learning.
So we model it even by learning the Enneagram the last couple of years. Oh, let's learn this. And we even talk to the kids about what is that? I'm learning this too. I hope when you're 48, you're still learning these things. That's part of life.
Great
I think
attitude.
That's important. So
it's a great attitude.
Yeah.
Yes. So we finished kind of the overview of the instinctual centers. I will say that these instincts. So I'm gonna actually say that the instincts are strongest of all.
Yeah. The gut, heart, and head. That's
yes.
what you're talking about.
There is a deeper instinct
behind those.
There is. So the gut center, the instinct behind the gut center, is actually called self-preservation. And every one of these instincts is given by God for good purpose.
Right.
And then on the heart side, it's actually called intimate. I will say an Enneagram is called sexual. So some people we're just being real here.
Yeah.
And then for the head side, it's the social instinct. So these are behind these instincts. We have all of them, but we overemphasize one of these.
Yeah.
So for the gut folks, the 8s, 9s, and 1s, things around self-preservation tend to be very important to them. Anything having to do with life, the body, health, money, home, car maintenance, all of this kind of thing. So underneath this is this need to stay alive and make sure. And I think about it like on the Titanic. I love this example because it's, for those who have a really strong self-preservation instinct that's front and center, if I don't get my life vest on, I can't even think about, helping you get into your lifeboat or helping someone else. Like I can't relax enough to attend to anything else. And so for folks who have a self-preservation instinct, they really want to have the things in their immediate environment organized. They want to have, their bank account in order. And a lot of times they then become very generous with their resources because they know that their house is in order. Yeah. And then they want to share. So just because you're self-preserving doesn't mean you're selfish.
Right.
And we're all self-preserving.
In one form or
we
another.
need to be. And when it comes down to it, we're going to try to save our lives.
Yeah.
And God wants us to. All creatures are. When it comes to the heart, it is good to think about we either call it intimate, one-to-one, or sexual. This is the instinct that says, I want to have a pair bond. I need to find someone who is going to merge with me in oneness. And we think about the Lord, in I think John 17 is, I am in you and you are in me. And, he does this with us and he fills us up. And when you're in marriage, the physical act, of course, allows for the species to continue, right? So we end up with children. But the sexual instinct is looking for depth, intimacy. It's a creative movement. So someone who majors on this will be very creative at work. They're always. And
so, just to help people, as far as I understood, because when I first heard this, I had to be taught using the word sexual just means this intimacy that doesn't mean physical intimacy.
That's right.
Okay, that's so right. Just to be clear,
yes,
I don't know.
That's good.
I don't know if you're wondering why you keep using that word. Well, when we use that word here in this, we're talking about an emotional intimacy with someone. Yes. A spouse or someone really close, like we just did in our sermon a couple weeks ago. I think Pastor Thomas preached about it. David and Jonathan.
Exactly.
Very much.
That's the same gendered friend.
Yeah.
And so a couple examples on this one. Let's go back to the Titanic. There was a couple, a woman and a man, and of course none of the men were getting on the lifeboats. They weren't supposed to anyway. But this woman, they were a well-to-do couple from New York. They had adult children back in New York. And they kept urging this woman, please, please get on the lifeboat. The ship is, it's like this at this point. Yeah. And she said, no, what is my life without my love, my husband? And she stood at the rail and went down with him. And you hear about these couples where, one dies and then 2 weeks later another one dies. Yeah. And that is the heart brokenness. That is the heart bond that is extremely deep. Another thing would be you go into a party and you're just looking for someone interesting to connect with. And you end up talking to someone half the night because you have some shared interests. It's a creative spark. There's like juice there. Yeah. But who cares what else is happening? Yeah. It's because you found someone that has that like-mindedness. So that is the heart, and that is the sexual instinct. And then the social instinct is strength in numbers. We're on a team. How's everyone doing? Yeah. People who lead with instinct are thinking about the group. Their energy is kind of scattered. If you think about a politician, talk about working the room, right? It's a quick, hey, nice to see you. Nice to see you. Nice to see you. And sometimes when you're with a social person, you're talking to them and they see someone behind you and they're like, hey, I'll talk to you in a minute. Hold on. And we sometimes look down on that. You basically described me during fellowship hour. I was thinking to myself, I was like, you're talking about what I'm like. I'm like, oh, yeah, I can see that. Yeah, and it's not bad because we can't always go deep. Right. And we can't always be about taking care of ourselves. We need all three. Right. But the socials, the downside of the socials can be about hierarchies. Where do I fit into the group? Am I important to the group? What does the group think of me?
Or shallowness, I suppose.
It can be. And each one of these instincts, the self-preservation instinct can be me first.
There's first. The fully broken side of it.
There is.
And what it looks like as opposed to the scale of healthiness.
That's right. And for all of them. And I will say it's interesting, even some folks that lead self-preservation can turn it on themselves. They will destroy themselves. So it can be the opposite. And the same with any one of these instincts that are very important. So that's an instinct overview. But let's just look at the numbers. Sure. So let's start with type 8. And these are all in the gut center. And so the way it works with this system is, and remember, we're in the gut center. We're talking about anger and control. Yeah. The number to the left is always the obvious one. The one in the middle is repressed. and the one to the right is conflicted.
Uh-huh.
So
I have not heard that. That's interesting.
That is interesting.
Like, that's making more sense to me.
and
Keep
it goes
going.
that
Keep
way
going.
all the way around.
Okay.
So type 8, if you've met a type 8, they have, and again, all gut types have a grounded presence physically.
Mhm.
They walk in the room, and it's like, I'm here, deal with me.
Yeah.
It doesn't always have to be
Yep,
a
I see
negative
that.
deal with me, but it's
Yeah.
like it's like boom,
Yeah.
I'm here.
I'm here.
I'm here.
Yeah.
You know, and again, there is this energy that is solid and grounded. It's almost like a pillar has been put into the ground, and
Yeah.
there they are.
Yeah.
The 8s use their control outwardly.
Mm-hmm.
We say they go against people. They want to control you or the environment to make their desires happen.
Mm-hmm.
That can be great, especially like in time of war.
Yeah.
Some generals Patton, other generals,
Mhm.
we're going to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to do what I say,
Yeah.
and we're going to make this happen. And
It can be helpful as a teacher.
Would be.
it can be,
Yeah.
yeah. And the thing about 8s is they love a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
They want to overcome something. They want to be overcomers, and they will be. You know, they really do make it happen. They run into problems with kind of bullying sometimes, or forcing their way. 8s have an inner sense of, we talk about justice being
Yeah.
part of this center. It's like their inner code is their code, and so they won't necessarily follow the rules if they don't think the rules are worthy of being followed.
Right.
But if their word is their bond, though, so if
Yeah.
they give a promise, they will keep that
Yes.
promise.
Yeah.
And 8s have a special affinity for the down and out,
Mm.
those who are truly disenfranchised. So if you're on a subway or something, and you know an 8 seated, and they see a feeble old lady, they will get up in 2 seconds and like literally put the old lady in the place and just say, I will take care of you, I will protect you.
Yeah.
They're also called protectors.
Mm-hmm.
But if there's some kid, you know, that like is fully able-bodied, they're like, get out.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
you don't need to be here.
Yeah.
The 9 is, you know, we talk about kind of the repressed or the hidden. Type 9s are peaceful people.
Mm.
They want peace inside, they want peace outside, tend to avoid conflict, they want harmony, do not want disharmony. Well, what does anger do?
Yeah.
It's kind of like a lightning bolt, right? If you say, I really feel, even an opinion about something can create disconnection. Yeah. 9s want to stay connected to everyone and everything. Their place at the top of this circle, think about the fact that the 9 is like putting its arms around the world. The 9 is so much about harmonizing and staying connected. So any break in that creates deep stress. So there is an incredible suppression of anger that goes on from the time they're very little. 9s will look at the power figure in their life, mom, dad, and work really hard to merge with and please that person, so as not to create any dissonance and to stay peaceful. They're go along to get along. They often struggle to know what they even feel or want because they have so long taken that offline. And so, you know, but what they bring is this incredible diplomacy. 9s can see everybody's side. They truly do. They're like, well, I see your point, and I see your point, and I see your point. Some of the best diplomats are 9s because they are able to bring people who can't get along together. Yeah. They are peacemakers, very insightful, tend to actually do well with animals. They're very earth. We talked about being grounded. Yeah. They're very earth connected. Yeah. So the type 1s are the conflicted. Type 1 knows they're angry. They feel resentment. They feel irritability. Yeah. What are they upset about? Well, a couple things. Number 1, that the world is broken. They're really mad that things aren't as they should be. They're mad about themselves not being as they should be. Sometimes they're called the moral perfectionists. Incredibly hard on themselves. They often have that inner voice that is telling them to do better. You know, you don't make this mistake. Yeah. But thus they're very sensitive to anyone criticizing them. Yeah. But what's sad is that at their worst, type 1s will be very critical of others. Now they'll say that they're doing that to kind of shore them up and improve them. 1s are so much about improvement. They're not happy to sit on their laurels.
They want to improve you. They want to improve themselves. They want to improve their environments. At their best, they are noble.
Mm-hmm.
They have a deep wisdom, and they're moral. They can hold the moral plumb line in a family, in a society. Sometimes they're called reformers. A lot of the type 1s, like in the 1800s and 1900s, were the ones that would start like the Red Cross, or go into these factories and see that children were being abused and say, we're not going to stand for this anymore.
Yeah.
A lot of the, freeing of the slaves and women's suffrage movements have the sharpness of the one. So there's that anger power behind it, but then there's the morality of we need to move back toward what's right.
Like the healthy side of it is bringing
the healthy side of it is very powerful.
Yeah.
The unhealthy side is that if you're around a one who's not healthy, you will feel that you're never enough.
Mm-hmm.
And in some Christian homes, it can become legalistic.
Mm-hmm.
And we would say that a one could be a Pharisee.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they're not as aware of the beam in their own eye, but they're fault finding.
Yeah.
Again, trying to help and improve. But ones are very responsible people. And, we talked about the 8 kind of has their own inner code, but they're not going to necessarily follow the rules. The ones are rule followers and rule enforcers. Another positive on ones, many ones are teachers. They are really good at knowing a body of knowledge and wanting to pass that on to the next generation. And they have the skills and the discipline to do that.
Yeah.
So that's your gut center. Your heart center, you've got your obvious. So you've got your 2. The 2 wants to love everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to feel that love. And they tend to be affectionate. And they're going to be expressive. And they want to help. They want to help advise you. So sometimes they're called the helpful advisor, helpful supporter. The downside is the 2s will often give advice when not asked. They will help you
when you don't want
it. They will overhelp. They're boundary breakers.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of 2s are known to be naturally codependent.
Mm.
They want to rescue others. What they don't realize is that there are strings attached.
Yeah.
What they really want, if you remember about the heart, it's just like, do you love me?
Yeah.
Do you love
do
me?
all these things to get your love back. Yeah. And you're not showing it. Like, you might use words, there's no strings attached, but there are. Would a 2 be like, I don't know if you're this way, but it's like a mom with 5 kids, and when they come back home, what's all the special meal or part of a meal? And I'm gonna make something different for everybody for Thanksgiving or for Christmas, and I have to cook 5 different dishes because each one has their favorite, and I want them all to get what they want.
Yes, it absolutely could be.
Or like a one would be like, this is just the meal. This is
it. Could be. Yes, it could be. This is what we do. Yes, it definitely could be. And I think the 2 wants to have a special place in your heart so that you'll always need them. So they try to become indispensable.
Yeah.
Again, the overhelping and can struggle with letting go.
Yeah. Okay.
There's a deep fear of loneliness
Mm-hmm.
in the 2. They really want, and honestly, at the root of it is, can someone take care of me?
Yeah.
So sometimes the joke is, like if the type 2's in a group, they're like, hey, does anyone want water? Can I go do a coffee run?
Yeah.
It's like, you want someone to get you some
water.
Okay.
Do you want some water?
Yeah. It's like, no, whatever you want. On the high side, 2s can be incredibly agape love. Mm-hmm. When they learn to give just before the Lord, just give. Yeah. Give as unto God.
Truly with no strings
attached. It's a beautiful
attached.
thing. The person will feel it.
Yeah.
You know when someone's being sappy. Another thing that 2s will do is they'll flatter. Flattery is a form, and they can read people really well because they've spent their lives doing it. Remember, they practiced from the time they were little, and they'll know your needs before you need them. Yeah. Sometimes, so 2s make a great assistant because they can kind of prepare the way ahead. They know, and they're good managers of people because they're in tune with people. The type 3 is the repressed of this center. So the type 3 is the least emotional. Mm-hmm. They're out of touch with their emotions. The heart center tends to be emotive, and they're feeling their feelings, but the 3 is like, I don't have time for that. And besides, it's not efficient. It's not going to get me anywhere successful. Right. So I'm just shelving it. I don't even want to know about it. The 3 is about how can I get your love and affection by being successful. Mm-hmm. I want to be admired. Yeah. But what does that mean? Well, in a family in a certain country, it could be this thing. And in a family of, really religious people, become a pastor. Yeah. That's the highest form of success. I come from a military family. How many of the kids became in the military? Well, 2 of them out of the 3.
Yeah.
And then he married someone from West Point, and West
Point. You went to a specialty.
Yes,
you went
that's right.
to.
It's higher.
Yeah.
It's a higher level, and
Well,
so
I'm going to go apply for the special forces. You're not. I'm going to
yes,
Okay.
yes, because for the 3 child, they really want to meet the parental expectation for glory and one up.
Yeah.
To really ensure. But there's so much intensity around the work involved in getting that success. And 3s have an incredible work ethic.
Yeah.
But the other thing about the 3 is they know what looks good. So they're good at marketing. They know how to sell and look good doing it. At their best, they can teach others how to be successful. You see tons of books out there, how to be successful.
Sure.
And the people, a lot of times they're coaches, they're life coaches, or they go into companies and they help them market. And that is important.
Yeah.
We want, look at this place.
You want winners. You want people that are trying out there. You want in the healthy version. Yeah, I can
absolutely,
see that.
absolutely. In the unhealthy version, it starts to devolve into exaggeration, deceit, spinning, making themselves look better than they really are.
Anything to get ahead type of thing.
It can be.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it can be pretty cutthroat. And the type 4 is the conflicted. So the type 4 feels all the feelings. They really want that affection. So they want attention from others, but then they also don't.
Don't make me the highlight.
Don't make me the highlight, but yet some type 4s are performing artists. Either they're musicians or they're painters or dancers. 4s have an incredible ability to tap into the darker emotions. They're not afraid of them. They want to express them. They can be angsty. They can be melancholy. They can be moody. And they'll often delve deeper into that mood to accentuate it. They'll play specific music that's sad.
Yeah.
But they're incredible when someone just needs presence.
Yeah.
4s are great at not needing to fix things for people because they often dwell in that darker place a lot. They're comfortable with it. So they don't have a problem being sad with someone. And they're incredibly helpful in just attending to those emotions.
Right.
What's interesting, I want to bring back to the diagram here, is these numbers. If you look at the 4 and 5, they're in what's called the abyss. So the 6 and 3.
I like that.
Yes.
I wondered why it looked like that.
The 6 and 3 are on street level.
Yeah.
The 3 and 6 are common sense people. They know how to make things happen on street level. They're productive individuals. They're just really great at the realities of life. Okay, you move up a notch. Let's look at the 2 and the 7. They're up in the sky. 2s and 7s are highly positive.
Yeah.
Everything is like, let's keep it upbeat, okay?
Yeah.
Like their balloons kind of floating up in the air. The 2 wants to keep you happy and give you a cake and a pie, and the 7's like, let's go do something super fun.
Yeah.
They call it 7 up.
Yeah.
All right. And the 1 and the 8 are like above it all. The 8 is dominant. The 1 is judge over the world. So they're up there on the high place. And the 9 is like, let's just bring it all together, everybody. What's interesting about the 9, though, is that the 9 is universal and they want everyone to be in harmony, but they actually will fall down into the abyss sometimes. There's a deep place within the 9. Again, I think it's that inability to be who they really are, to really share their anger, that they can sometimes fall down into that space.
Right.
In the abyss. So it's kind of a cool thing. So the 4, a little bit more with the 4. At their best, 4s are expressive and creative and okay with the darkness. At their worst, 4s can have to be so original that they can get distorted, it can get grotesque, or it can get crazy. But they're often afraid of abandonment and loneliness, and so in relationships, 4s can be very push-pull. Do you love me? Do you love me? Come back. Oh, you're kind of like, I like the idea of you. I have a fantasy. Why don't you go away? And 4s don't like the mundane. They don't like the daily tasks of life. Like the 3s and 6s are like, let's do the task. This is cool. I feel really good. The 4s are like, can somebody else do that?
Yeah.
Because I'm kind of special.
I'm busy.
I'm busy. Can we get in relationships?
I'm working on my art right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Or I just don't feel like it right now.
Yeah.
I'm not in the mood.
Yeah.
So yes, that's the 4s. So now we're going to move over, and there's this divide. Now we're in the head center looking at the 5. 5s are very, very cerebral. 5s tend to feel socially awkward naturally, like someone didn't give them the manual for how to be. And they are like all up in here. So when a 5 is doing really well, they'll get into their body and move their body and be athletic. But there's an overemphasis on knowledge.
Yeah.
And why? Because we talked about the head center is about safety and security. So for a 5, it's like, how can I stay safe? How can I fit in socially? I need to know things. And not just know them, but I'm going to master them.
Yeah.
So 5s you're going to find them in science and academics, any form of deep study. 5s want to have time to do what they want to do. 5s can feel very drained by intrusion or interruption. They need to be away from people to do the deeper study or do the thing they need. They get very depleted. And even some 5s can have a social instinct, but they're still depleted. Like they talked about one pastor who was a 5, and the congregation created like a little cave for him to escape into. Sometimes 5s will just leave the room. Yeah. You're like, where'd they go?
Are they like introverts?
Not all 5s, but they have a natural introversion. They really do. And a high
someone told me about a pastor like that, and actually grew the church from 60, 70. Now the church has like 300-400 people. But most Sundays, the church, once it started having associates and stuff, most times after services, he's not around. He just gets on his horse and he goes out. And he's just not there.
Yep.
He's just, I don't know if that makes him a 5, but there's something of like, okay, I need to step away from this.
Yes.
And break the mold of the pastures, like the gregarious one all over the place.
Oh, absolutely. And I think even understanding your pastor and what helps your pastor thrive can be extremely helpful. Yes, and so the 5, they need that time away. In a social situation, you might find a 5, like at a party or something, talking about the same thing all the time, but it's their field of interest and study. And a lot of times they won't talk a lot because 5s are observers. That's another name for them. They're not going to say something unless they're sure it's correct. And maybe they feel, I need to do some more research on that. So if they're asked an opinion, they might say, that's not my expertise. Whereas other types will be like, well, let me tell you what I know, And,
but if you hit a subject they know, or you hit something they've read about, they've really spent time with.
You better just relax,
Get there for a while.
Yes, because they're gonna talk, and they really love to get with others. So think about C.S. Lewis and Tolkien and the group that they had.
Inklings.
There's 5-ness in them. A lot of them are professors in higher academics, fields of study. Or even, like a person who will study a particular bug for 20 years. They have the ability to go that deep on something and actually don't want anyone bothering them, so they can.
It's helped me. I've recognized some people that are 5s, and if I know I have to spend time with them, I struggle with the awkwardness in conversations. Like, we're going to talk, and you sit there and be like, don't want that. And I just think of what are some of their deeper interests. And I'll just tell me what has happened with that, or where are you at? And I can just sit back for the next 15 minutes.
That's right.
It's a great conversation with Pastor Josh. I didn't say anything. I just realized that they were willing to, if you do the right topic,
that's right.
Do the wrong topic, and they're like, I'm not really sure about that. And you're like, okay, what next? Like, awkward
Dead
again. It's like, figure that out.
Yes. Yeah, that's great. Those are wonderful things for even that transition when we talk about how to practically use some of this, realizing. And I think, while you're doing that too, is realizing that the silence is okay. And for 5s.
I hate that. But yes, it's true.
For 5s, it's
You're not a 5.
No, I'm definitely not a 5.
Yeah. It can be relaxing for them, and they can feel safe in that space. They don't want overwhelm. They don't want to owe anyone anything either. So imagine like a 2 over giving. They're like, whoa. I didn't ask you for that.
Yeah. I don't want to owe you anything.
I don't want to owe you anything. Sometimes 5s can be minimalists. Like even in their home, maybe they're extremely wealthy because they're created some microchip or something, but their house is so sparse.
Yeah.
Because they don't want to be encumbered. There's a simplicity. And more 5s are bachelors or bachelorettes. They're happier to be alone. I'm not saying all 5s are that way, but of this one type is the most of them. are satisfied to just pursue their studies or their fields of interest.
Okay.
And you know. So the 6 is a very complex type. And let me just draw your attention back to the diagram one more time. I will say that the 9, the 3, and the 6 are running all the time, okay, within us. So the 9, let's just say that the 3, let's go to the 3. The 3, we've talked about this intensity about accomplishment and success, and they're efficient and productive. So the 3 is a movement of motion. So just think about it like someone rolls a ball.
Yeah.
They roll the ball from the 3, and the 6 goes, hold up, stop. I don't know about that. So 6s are contrarian. They're going to say, have you thought of that? What about this? This might happen. Let's run a worst case scenario. They're sometimes called the devil's advocate, but they're loyal to the group. So 6s, as 5s are more individualists, 6s are actually more group oriented in general. Now, some 6s are introverted, but in general, they want to be part of a team. They really do. And so as a way to bring security and safety to the team, they're going to be a little bit oppositional. And the purpose of it is to make sure that the group stays safe.
Testing.
Yes, and they do test. And in relationships, they're slow to trust. Very slow. And they will test their partner, their friends, or the group to say, can I count on you? Are you for real? Are you trustworthy? And if they pass the test, the 6s are actually the most loyal, that they will stay in even dysfunctional relationships longer than any type. You would think it would be the 9, but the 6s actually will, because it's like, once we have this loyalty and affinity, I'm yours for life. Yeah. And it takes a lot to break that.
Right.
So yes, 6s deal with courage and cowardice. Because they're in the anxiety center, at their best, they are incredibly courageous. At their worst, they're so fearful that they don't even know what to think. They can't think for themselves. They're asking everyone their opinion. They outsource their authority. So 6s are hot and cold in the way that they want to obey a trustworthy authority, but they'll also rebel against that authority if they don't think that authority is trustworthy. Right. And they're always watching, picking up signals. They're skeptical. They're testing. They're like, well, I don't know. Can I trust you? I'm not sure. But they don't trust themselves. Right. And so it's learning to rest in the fact that they're always safe in the Lord. Always. No matter what. Whether people like them, agree with them or not. 6s want to avoid blame so much. And that's why they want to know the rules. What are the rules? It's not that they might not break them, but they want to know what the rules are so that they can avoid blame. And they are running worst case scenarios. You know, most 6s, like there was one guy that talked about, I don't know which incidents this was, but he said he was always afraid of a hijacking on a plane. And so he had all these scenarios. He ran about exactly what he would do. And he was on a hijacking. It literally happened. And he said, I was the calmest. Everyone around me was falling apart.
I've already been there.
He had.
I've already been there.
Because, you know, 6s have already, like, had a car accident, died. You know, they've gone through it all.
Yeah.
And so sometimes that can really create a tremendous amount of anxiety in them because they're up in their head.
Yeah.
They have a hard time getting out. But sometimes for a 6, it's great to run 1 or 2 worst case scenarios. Be like, I got that. Yeah. I can pull it out when I need it. Now I can relax. Yeah. I thought about it.
This is where I sit.
Yeah.
Very much so, as it sits.
Yeah.
And I think that the words that you said that were the hardest that I'm learning is to trust yourself. Like, very hard to trust other people as it is, but first to trust, that means I have to trust my gut or trust my heart. You know, I don't like that as it is. So, but yeah, it's very much that way. And when people, it took me a long time to figure out what I was on here, because 6s don't trust any of this anyway.
6s are the hardest to type.
I know. I figured that out the hard way.
They are the hardest to type. And I will tell you also that 6s and 9s in particular are meant to be what is needed in each environment. Yeah. And 3s are known to chameleon. So some people actually have a tritype of a 369. And they're very difficult to type because they're accommodating and moving. But that's God's purpose. There are many, many 6s in the world. Yeah. And they need to be able to adapt and to say to a boss, what do you need from me? Okay, well, what do you need? And like I said, they are team players. They feel so alive when the parts of the team are all working together. There's tremendous joy. Yes, there's tremendous joy. And we're all in this together. They're very hardworking. And 6s in relationships will do the work of the relationship. like without complaint and without strings attached. It's like they'll make the coffee, they'll clean the car, they'll do all of that. They're very pragmatic in that way. Type 7s are charming, joyful. They can be class clowns. They're always up for an adventure. They're always wanting to travel the world.
Yeah.
Usually you're like, where are you going to go to next? They've got 3 already planned out. They have FOMO, they are also opportunists. So sometimes they can get in trouble where I'll say to someone, hey, let's go visit Puerto Rico next year. Okay. And they say this is a type 1 or a type 3. They're very planned, maybe even a 6. So this person's saving their money, and they're thinking, I'm going to Puerto Rico with my friend Gina or whoever. And next thing you know, Gina gets an invite from someone else to go to Brazil. And it's like during the same time, it's going to be cheaper. She doesn't say anything to XYZ friend who's been planning. And she's like, last minute says, oh, I'm going to Brazil. And it's like, what? Oh, sorry, man. Better opportunity. I'll catch you next time. So it's like, whoa. So yes, remember they're in the anxiety center. So it's like, how are they in the anxiety center? Because they just seem so positive and they're running from emotional
They're
pain.
avoiding it.
They're avoiding
It's
it.
all avoidance.
We're going to stay happy and fun, and we're going to fill our lives with what show am I watching and what restaurant am I going to, and we're going to just not be in touch with the emotional pain. So 7s run from it like the plague.
Yeah.
And sometimes when really hard and painful things are happening, like someone's dying, they literally feel like they can't be in the room. It's too sad.
Right.
Because there's a fear of almost like suffocating. 7s will explain that they feel like they're going to be overwhelmed by the emotion. They don't even want to. So they're just going to avoid it. And they'll avoid it with the fun and the upbeat and all of that. 7s, in their strength, do bring that positivity and that lightheartedness. And I will say, in a crisis, a 7 can be an angel of mercy, where they'll do an act. But they don't want to be the person that day in, day out is that caregiver.
Yeah.
So they're, it'll be fun. It'll be something unexpected. And they're also really, really creative. We talked about the 4 being creative, but the 7s, sometimes are misdiagnosed with ADHD because they have what's called monkey mind. They are constantly pulling things from different, even fields of study, and they're synthesizing them in a very creative way. So, I mean, Hollywood, the fashion industry, and let's think about the best parts of these things, full of 7s.
Yeah.
And that they tend to like the bright colors and expressive-ness, but things that are unusual. So the 4 and the 7 are in that way, kind of running a positive and a sort of a deeper negative vibe on that. And I think we talked about, let's go back to here, the obvious for the 5 in the head center. Think about them as studying, academic, brainy. This is the repressed. The 6 often doesn't realize they have anxiety. Some 6s know they do, but a lot of times 6s will run those worst case scenarios. They'll set up their life in such a way that they've planned it all out. Yep. They are like, I'm not anxious. No, I'm not stressed.
I didn't know I was anxious until about 8 years ago.
Because they fixed it.
They thought about it ahead of time.
Covered. I had a lot of scenarios covered for a lot of things.
Yeah.
I still do that. And Katie will tell you, well, if we don't do that, this is plan B. I already have plan B set up. Right? I've done that. Are you going to do this? Well, maybe. But, if that doesn't work out, here's the date where I switch to this one. I already have the backup plan.
Which is really good.
Yes. When you're healthy with it. Before, I didn't know I had anxiety. So I was just like, I don't know.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I get it.
You can see that it's always 2 sides of the same coin. It's like such a blessing to have a 6 on your team who can run the worst case scenarios, who has the work ethic, who wants to build the team. And by the way, 6s are, any of these types are creative. I never want to box anyone. No. But 6s are writers for shows in Hollywood. 6s are also stand-up comedians more often. Why? Because they're on street level. They're common man.
They're preaching.
They're preaching.
Street preacher.
That's true.
But they like to make fun of themselves. 6s do a lot of self-deprecating humor. Yeah. And they like to call out the absurdities in life. And so, that's just another thing about type 6s. They are actually childlike in a way that is very endearing when they're healthy. Yes, so that's the repressed. They don't know they're anxious usually until later. And then the 7 is conflicted. They're like, I don't want to feel this anxiety. They kind of know it, and so they're just running and covering.
Yeah.
So, yes.
Well, that's the whole chart.
Yes.
So I'm going to give Katie an opportunity to ask a question or two, if you have any, because I'm going to bring this section to a close in just a minute. So, like,
Yeah, well, so my one question that I've been thinking about ahead of time, you sort of covered in that I've heard comments of, oh, we shouldn't do Enneagram because it's got pagan sources.
Yeah. There are some pagan sources.
Yeah.
Yes. And anyone who tells you otherwise is not telling the truth.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, there are. And what I have to say to that is what I said at the beginning.
Yeah.
If that is something that you feel sensitive about, don't look at it, don't get involved in it. You need to obey God.
Yeah.
I think what we might not realize is just about everything that we do in life has pagan sources.
Yeah.
I mean, whether it be companies that we don't maybe agree with that made the tea that I'm drinking, or businesses that we choose to boycott or not because we know, but many businesses we don't even know what they support or don't support. Christmas, and has had its, there's so many
pagan
things.
sources.
A lot
Santa
of our
Claus
hymn
or
tunes,
not.
A lot of our hymn tunes come from bar tunes.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So, but again, we need to honor God with our conscience. Yes, were there contributors to this? Yes. And I just pull this alongside science because this is psychological and personality science. Mm-hmm. Contributors are seeing things, but they're not necessarily following God, but they're still contributors that are seeing what's true.
Yeah.
Just like medical science, it's the same thing.
It's the same.
They may not acknowledge that there's a creator, but they're
Often
discovering
don't.
what he's created.
That's right.
And so
Yeah.
I do see that.
They don't give attribution to God.
No,
Right.
I wish more would, but they
I know,
don't.
me too.
I agree. So this has been very helpful.
Oh, it's fascinating.
Of course, we could probably go for several more hours just discovering this.
There's so much more and many, many more
Right.
layers, but yes.
So what I'm going to do is, in general, these 3 legs, the head, the heart, the gut, understanding them, maybe for people listening, just if you don't know your type, just start thinking through some of this and realizing we're all going to lean one way and find the healthier balance. You may give us, hopefully you'll give us maybe a website or 2 that will help people discover that a little more.
Yeah.
I have this image, I know I'll have it on the screen. I probably can have it as something that they can also print off if you want to have this one. There are a lot of other ones out there. But I think for today, it's just knowing yourself. The better you know yourself, the better you can interact in the world. And then you can then begin to see this in others.
Yes.
And we can't just go around and say, well, that person is this. But you can begin to kind of generalize and learn and discover. And it's helpful. To me, it's been helpful to think, well, this person leans more with their heart. So it doesn't mean they're only a 3 or only
That's
2,
right.
but I know that's the dominant one that comes out in whatever they're giving me.
Right.
And it helps how I interact. Like I said with the 5, it helps. I know that person. 5s to me kind of stick out in some ways. I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah, they're pretty. Some are easier to type.
So I hone in on something that they're really into, and it's like, okay, let me ask some questions there, and there's this just flows out. But that's helped me instead of like long awkward silences that I feel awkward and maybe they don't.
Sure.
But I do.
But yeah,
That's right.
Sure. But I think that's helpful to everybody.
it is.
To take this, if you want, like we said, and to just begin to know yourself better. I think God wants us to know ourselves better anyway. So we know where we're off from being like Christ and which direction we're going to be like Christ.
Yes.
And I hope we're gonna end the session here, but I hope the next session we're gonna talk about. We haven't learned all of this; we're not experts, but now how do I take this to my company party, to my workplace, to Christmas gatherings and family gatherings, and
Definitely.
we've all had issues at all of these gatherings. And how do I allow that to? How do I allow it to inform me, but how to interact? How do I see that? I'm not an expert, but how can I just generically begin to use this?
Yes.
And then where we go from there. So
Great.
I'm actually going to stop it this week, and we're going to keep recording, but we'll be back next week to give you all of that as well. So thank you very much, and we'll see you soon.
Take care.